starting in 5 seconds. Mr. Vice Chairman, Sir, I welcome the budget proposals for the year 2012-13, which are all comprehensive and which embrace most of the development plans that we have envisaged for the establishment of a socialistic society in this country. In spite of the taxation and the introduction of fresh duties, we find that the finance minister has succeeded in disturbing only a microscopic section of the people of this country to extract sufficient funds for our schemes. The finance minister has also succeeded in finding funds for almost all the development plans of this country, which will add to our good. While we discuss the journal aspects of the budget, we will have to consider the activities of most of the sections that are now covered in the budget. Even though the provisions are there, I think, sir, the expenditure on some of the activities envisaged in this budget should be subjected to a thorough scrutiny. In this respect, sir, I wish to bring to the notice of this House the special feature of the educational system of this country. Some of the members have mentioned something about the educational system of this country, have remarked that the allocation of funds is not adequate and that the provision should be revised according to the needs of this country. As the honorable member was speaking in Hindi, I did not thoroughly understand what he meant, but still, sir, the educational system has created a sort of confusion in our country over the last 15 years, and every now and then we had been changing the schemes and plans for educating our children, and various states have adopted different schemes which have actually created a feeling of disintegration among the people of this country. In some of the states, they have switched on to the regional language as the medium of instruction, and in some states, they think that English should be retained as a medium of instruction. But the people believe that the medium of instruction should be Hindi, that is the national language of our country. But, sir, the time is not yet ripe for us to switch on to Hindi. So, as and when we find it feasible, we may switch on to our national language, but till that time, we will keep English as the medium of instruction in all educational institutions. Sir, the other day, the University Grants Commission submitted a report wherein they have mentioned that English should be the medium of instruction, at least in the colleges. Sir, it is my opinion that English should be retained in this country for years to come till we find that we could translate all the essential books on science and technology, etc., into Hindi, which should be able to help us in educating our boys, especially in the technical institutions, through Hindi as the medium. Here, sir, some of the members have pointed out with regard to the introduction of different type of education in the same state or in various parts of this country. We find that a majority of the children of our country are educated in the basic system, which brings out, as far as I know, second class citizens in this country who are to be governed by the boys who are sent to the public schools. Most of the children of the haves are sent to the public schools and they are imparted expert training, and when they come out they are definitely superior to those boys who undergo this basic system of education. If this basic education is considered to be the best for the development of our country in the socialistic way, we will have somehow or other to find some better means of imparting education whereby they will be able to compete with the students who are now undergoing training in the public schools. Unless we do it, we will be creating, as I previously mentioned, a second class of citizens in this country. I hope the authorities who are concerned with the planning of education in this country will review their schemes according to the suggestions that I have put forth now. In the same way, sir, our country is mainly depending on our agriculture and industries for the development of our economy. But the agriculturists are an ignorant section of our people who do not find, in spite of the development in that sector of our economy of high production, a better income as the industrial section is having in this country. The industrial section is fast improving and their standard of living has gone high. At the same time, in spite of the better production in the agriculture section, the agrarian population has not come at par with the industrial section of this country. In the same way, industrial laborers are organized. Most of them are given so many benefits and advantages according to the legislation that is passed for the betterment of industrial laborers of this country. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Madam Deputy Chairman, I welcome this opportunity to make a few observations during the discussion on the finance bill. At this stage, therefore, it is better to use this opportunity to make a survey of the economic situation and find out what the present condition of the people is, whether they are satisfied, and if they are not satisfied, what the reasons are. I feel this responsibility is greater today when the American aid is likely to be reduced, and therefore we have got to stand more on our own legs. When the plan was set forth, there were three sources from which we hoped to get finance for the plan, namely our own resources from the revenues, loans within the country through savings, and thirdly foreign help. The latter we need not discuss here. If we study the accomplishments of the plan and the resources that it has been possible to raise, we cannot deny that our expectations have not been fulfilled, and we have therefore to find out the reasons which have led to that situation. Here, incidentally, I would like to touch in a sentence or two the entire theme of the speech of Mr. Bhupesh Gupta. It is very easy to say this should be done or this could have been done from the opposition point of view, but I would like to ask him a question and he can reply to it later in some other speech, whether in Russia it would be possible for anybody, not in the debate in the parliament but even outside, to utter a single sentence against the government policy. In our democratic setup, we have allowed the people to criticize government policies. Even as Congress people, we are free to criticize the policies of the government, but the point is whether the doubts raised in the minds of the public by the people in the opposition who show their loyalty to a different setup would be conducive to create the enthusiasm that is necessary and the inspiration that is necessary to give their very best to fulfill the targets of the plan. This planned economy is really not a thing that will go successfully hand in hand with a democratic setup unless some other things are there, and they are the inculcation of a nation spirit, giving of proper national education to develop a national outlook. Unless these things are done as they are in other countries like England, unless that type of spirit is created in the country by all the people of all types of views not being allowed to create differences and doubts in the minds of the people, we cannot, in a democratic setup, have the success which we want, and we cannot fulfill our promises to the people. Without going further into that aspect which really came to my mind as a result of the long speech of Mr. Bhupesh Gupta, I would like to make a few suggestions so that a proper attitude towards giving of one's best to the plan and to raise the national economy can be developed. I would like to make 3 or 4 points. Firstly, we have to see that we take steps to check corruption at any level, whether it is among the people in the public sector or among the officials. Then we have also to see that we give a proper type of education, rouse a proper spirit of service. We must also check the trends for inflation and also lay stress on austerity so that the people will feel that there is something at stake. I would not like to take much time of the house. The main problem in our country is the growing population, and in spite of all the efforts that are made to raise the standard of living and raise production, etc., the results are not as easily perceptible as they should have been. That is a separate problem by itself, but in spite of that, it is possible for the government to show better results if the government were to undertake immediately and see that some of the promises that are made and acts that are passed and the plans that are drawn up are properly implemented. I have been seeing this lacuna in the present position. Now the government have started a new ministry called the Coordination Ministry. It was very necessary because the plans of the different ministries sometimes were likely to go contrary to each other's aims. I do not want to go into details. For instance, Take the question of the promotion of export. A commodity may be exported, but the price of that commodity in the country to the consumer may go on rising. Who is to see to that? Take tea for example. It had to be exported, and nobody was there to see whether there was enough tea for consumption in the country and what was the price at which it was available to the consumer in the past. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Madam Deputy Chairman, I rise to participate in this discussion not with a view to ventilate particular grievances or to secure concessions and relief in the taxation measures. I am one of those who believe that there is no justification for additional taxation unless the conditions laid down by the Taxation Inquiry Commission are complied with. It was a commission presided over by no less a person than Dr. John Mathai, one of our illustrious finance ministers, and it laid down that there was no justification for any additional taxation unless we complied with 2 or 3 conditions. One condition was that whatever tax was realized was being properly spent, that there was no wastage or superfluous expenditure being incurred. The Commission had pointed out that out of every rupee that was being raised by the government, 60 paisa were being spent on administration and about 20 paisa were being spent on social services, including education, etc., and the balance for other things. Another was that whatever tax was being imposed should be realized before we brought out measures for fresh taxation. They also had suggested that there was sufficient room for economy in all the ministers and departments, and effective steps should be taken forthwith to enforce the maximum possible economy in government expenditure. Now we have before us this audit report for 2011-12, which was presented to the Lok Sabha on the 6th June and which came to my hands last night, and I have not been able to study it. I find that during the last 5 years we have imposed additional taxation, and at the same time our revenue expenditure has gone up by about rupees 42 crores. So on the one hand we say that we are raising this money, these taxes, for the implementation of the plan, and for that reason every chief minister and ministers go about saying that we want money for the implementation of the plan. But what are the facts? We find that the money that has been raised is being used for administrative purposes. So it is not correct to say that. On the other hand, it is not proper because you must know that no plan, however well balanced and well thought out it may be, can be implemented in a democratic setup unless you can enthuse the people. We have been depending either on foreign aid or on indirect taxation or deficit financing, and more than once I have pointed out that these measures will not help to enthuse the people, and unless the people are enthused, we will not have any successful results so far as planning is concerned. Now it is necessary, it is time that we should take stock of the situation, for we have had 54 years of freedom and 52 years of democratic rule and of planned economy. What are the results? I am not one of those who minimize our achievements. We have had some achievements which are remarkable, of which we can be proud. We have had 3 general elections and we can be proud of all this. But it is equally true that the expectations of the people remain mostly unfulfilled, they remain unrealized. What are the expectations of the people? They wanted an adequate supply of drinking water, they wanted a little more wholesome food in their stomachs, a little more cloth on their bodies, a stronger roof over their heads, freedom from the clutches of the corrupt officials and the grabbing intermediaries, and speedier justice. What was what have we done? Have we been able to satisfy those expectations? I can say no. Even in the 11th 5-year plan, we find that all the villages have not been provided with adequate supply of drinking water. And as for food, only the other day the finance minister himself admitted in the other house that there was adulteration of foodstuffs all round. Not all that a former health minister admitted in this house that it was difficult to get any article of food unadulterated. Then what is the use of talking about pure food articles and of other health facilities when the people are getting articles which are as good as poison? They are injurious to health. The other day, the finance minister is reported to have said that the taxation proposals did not affect the common man because he needed only coarse cloth and ordinary food. During the last 5 years, we have raised rupees 424 crores more, including the taxation measures. This year, the increase in revenue will be about 75%. Since 2006, we have raised additional taxation to the tune of 75%, and during the 5 years preceding this year, the revenue expenditure has gone up by 85%. I would like to know how much of this amount has gone towards developmental expenditure and towards social services. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Mr. Vice Chairman, Sir, it was felt for a long time that the Limitation Act of 1908, which had certain amendments, deserved reconsideration in all its aspects. With this object in view, not only regarding this act, but regarding all the acts that are at present in force after independence, we appointed a law commission to revise all our laws. Sir, the law commission went into this matter in very great detail and referring to certain basic principles that have been adopted and certain amendments that have been suggested by the Commission of Revision appointed in the United Kingdom. They have gone through the whole enactment and suggested certain modifications not only in sections but also in articles. I am very glad that the Law Ministry has brought forward the bill on the basis, or as the Deputy Law Minister has pointed out, that they have not followed the recommendations of the Law Commission, but in general they have adopted the recommendations of the Law Commission in most of its aspects. Sir, as this matter is to be entrusted to the joint committee of both the houses, it will have the benefit of the deliberations of all those members who are in the select committee, and so generally speaking, neither is this the occasion nor the practice to go into details, but we can just suggest certain general matters so that the select committee may take them into consideration while deliberating in detail on the different provisions of this bill. Sir, in view of my experience as a lawyer, I feel that the Law Minister law of limitation is a procedural matter except in certain sections where it confers definite rights on account of possession or certain other matters. We have to see that the matters that are disputed or are under litigation are disposed of in as short a period as possible. The trend everywhere is that the people should not be kept in suspense either before litigation or after litigation. So, my humble suggestion to the members of the select committee will be to see that the course of litigation is as much circumscribed, as much reduced as is possible in consonance with the basic principle of fairness, justice, and equity. To substantiate what I am submitting, I would give an example, and the members of the select committee will go into details of the Law Commission report. So far as matters relating to trustees to whom the property has been entrusted, or in case of disability as minors or insane persons and similar cases are concerned, of course we will have to take all necessary precautions, and if necessary we can extend the time so that these persons who are suffering under any disability should not in the long run suffer on account of the provisions of the Limitation Act. That is one of the fundamental things which I hope the select committee will bear in mind. Apart from these two considerations, the older consideration that I will place before the select committee is relating to property, whether it is on the basis of contract or otherwise. I am glad that they are trying to very much simplify things by including definite categories into a simple form. Similarly, by including petitions in applications, they are trying to cover up a bigger scope, and all these details I need not go into at this stage, but I would request that they get the time reduced rather than extend it. For instance, in money matters, instead of 3 years, I would be happy if it is a case of 1 year. In matters of land, of course, those days when there were big zamindars, big talukdars, or Jagirdars were different. Now the whole trend has changed. If at all a litigation is confined to commercial matters where everybody is alert, the circumstances do demand, and if there is anything wrong, if somebody wants to claim something from the other party, it is no use sleeping over it. So the period of limitation should be considered in all these matters from this angle, that so far as possible let the litigation be introduced or let the suit be filed as early as possible, and accordingly the disposal could also be done. So I would request the select committee to take the changed circumstances of the country into consideration and come to the conclusion to simplify matters and let us reduce it so that the limitation as far as possible may be reduced. We know that protected disputes go on, as I have just pointed out, on which give rise to different interpretations, as is evident from the Law Commission report, and the different high courts have taken different views on certain matters. That creates confusion, that creates difficulties, unless either in the old decision there is a clear decision of the Privy Council, or at present there is a clear decision of the Supreme Court, difficulties would arise. So I would suggest that all these cases should be taken into consideration. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. In presenting this report, my first duty would be to thank the Debar Commission for preparing this valuable document. The Commission have gone deep into the various aspects of this problem and have produced an important and valuable document. The Commission had to tour a lot and they had to put in very hard work. I should like to convey my thanks and congratulations to the chairman of the commission, Sri Debar, and also to his other colleagues for this useful contribution. As the House is aware, the problem of the scheduled tribes has been constantly engaging the attention of the government since the Constitution was framed and adopted. Still, the government were not satisfied with the actual progress made. It was in that context that the government appointed two committees before the Debar Commission was appointed. The first was the Alvin Committee, which specially dealt with the problem of the tribal blocks. The second committee was appointed on the suggestion of the Estimates Committee to study the problem of the backward communities specially. On the top of that, in pursuance of Article 339 of the Constitution, the government appointed the Debar Commission, and now it is for the House to give its opinion on the recommendations made by the Commission. Our desire is that as soon as the Parliament, this House as well as the other House, has discussed this report and expressed its views, we will go ahead with the recommendations made and we will certainly like that they are implemented as early as possible. I do not want to enter into generalities, but it must be said that our country is vast and our problems are also immense. Generally, we are a very poor country, and it is true that during the British days, we did not actually realize what poverty meant. People suffered without much protest, but now, when the country is trying to go ahead with economic development, it is but natural that every section of our community should like to progress simultaneously. I think if we are frank, we should admit that there are certain weaker sections of our community in the country who have not made as much advance and progress as others have done. It is therefore become very important that we should lay special emphasis on the development of the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes. It is necessary, therefore, that we should carefully consider the various recommendations made and see what we can do to achieve a certain target within a prescribed period. The scheduled tribes have been living in isolated places, far off places, not connected with roads. They do not have any amenities of life, neither medical aid nor even proper educational facilities. We have to bring them out of that situation, and we must try to integrate those people with other sections of our countrymen. It is far from my mind to suggest that we should impose anything on them, whether our customs or our culture, though the culture is more or less common throughout the country, but every community has its own conventions and customs. Therefore, when I say that there should be complete integration, I do not mean to suggest that there should be imposition of anything on the tribal communities as such. Still, it is essential that integration will only be possible if their standards are raised, if they are more or less brought to the same level where we or the other people are who are not so isolated. So we have to bring these people to that level, and we can do that not by implementing certain schemes only, but by bringing about a radical change in our outlook and approach. There may be different communities and different religions in our country, but India had its own unique tradition in the past which we have to carry on and maintain even now. In fact, our philosophic base has been unity in diversity, and in it is our good fortune that when we are free, when we have become independent, various communities and religions exist in our country, and it should be our effort to bring about complete unity and solidarity amongst ourselves, even if our religions are different or we differ in our customs, rights, etc. So, I think that it is a challenge to all of us, and I have no doubt that we will be able to meet this challenge. I do not want to take more time of the house. As I said in the beginning, I do not want to enter into generalities. So far as the recommendations of the Commission are concerned, they can broadly be divided into two categories. There are recommendations which are to be dealt with or which directly concern the Home Ministry and some other ministries of the Government of India. There are other recommendations which mainly concern the state governments. In fact, it is the state governments which have really to execute and implement the programs. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. It was suggested by the Commission that there should be a separate department for the scheduled tribes. This matter was considered in the conference, but it was generally felt that if the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes are separated to be dealt with by different departments, there will be a good deal of duplication of work because two sets of officers will have to traverse the same area and more or less consider the same problems. It was therefore the unanimous opinion of the Conference of State Ministers that one department should deal with the problems of the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes, and it was also agreed that there should be a separate directorate for the same. If there is a separate directorate, then it can concentrate on problems concerning the scheduled tribes. It was also suggested that this directorate, which will have to be set up in all the states and especially in states where the population of the scheduled tribes exceeds 1 million, should also look after the work relating to the denotified and the nomadic tribes, in addition to, as I said, the work relating to the scheduled tribes. The conference was in favor of having tribes advisory councils to advise on the protection and development of scheduled tribes in all the states and urban territories, whether they have scheduled areas or not. The House, I am sure, is aware that there are scheduled areas and non-scheduled areas. Even in non-scheduled areas, a large number of scheduled tribes live, but for the special programs, we have decided to concentrate on the scheduled areas first. I shall come to that point later on, but I am merely mentioning that the scheduled tribes live both in scheduled areas and in non-scheduled areas. It was decided that wherever at present there is a combined reservation in the services for the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes, separate percentages of reservation should be fixed by the state governments, and it was agreed that the state government would instruct all local authorities like municipalities, panchayati samitis, jila parishads, etc. to follow the policies laid down by them in regard to the representation of all scheduled tribes in the services. It was decided to have a small committee of officials from the tribal welfare departments and the different departments at the state level to ensure coordination. The conference also agreed that there should be a section under the Chief Secretary for evaluation of the tribal welfare program. If all these and other decisions taken at the conference are implemented with speed as it is hoped they will be, there will be considerable improvement of the conditions which exist at present. I also want to mention, Madam, that we were told in the conference that this work was going to be entrusted to the Jila Parishads and Panchayats, and some of the schemes which have to be implemented in the rural areas will be executed by the Panchayats and the Jila Parishads. Well, I welcome this suggestion, but I only wanted to caution the district authorities and the state governments not to leave everything to the Jila Parishads and Panchayats and have no supervision and watch over their work. My fear is that because this will be a new work for them, they may not be able to bestow enough attention to the problems or the schemes concerning the scheduled tribes. They will have many other things to do. So, it would be necessary that the district authorities should keep constant watch and they should function as the friend and guide of the panchayats and the Jila Parishads. Madam, there are two major schemes in respect of the scheduled tribes in the central sector of the program which are controlled by the Ministry of Home Affairs and on which the entire expenditure is borne by the Government of India. These are the scheme of tribal development blocks and the scheme relating to promotion of cooperation among the scheduled tribe, particularly in the form of forest laborers, cooperative societies, and labor contract societies. The Ministry of Home Affairs appointed a special working group on cooperation about a year ago, and its report is expected shortly. That group will make detailed recommendations regarding the organization and structure of the society and other matters pertaining to the cooperative movement in all areas predominantly inhabited by the scheduled tribes. We hope that on the basis of the working group recommendation, it will be possible to energize and expand the cooperative movement in tribal areas and that the cooperatives will become the effective instruments for promoting the economic development of those areas. The other program, which is the major one and in which a great deal of interest is being evinced by the tribals themselves, is the program of tribal development blocks. The Commission have recommended that all tribal areas, whether they are scheduled areas or not, with a concentration of tribal population exceeding 50%, should be brought under the tribal blocks. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Sir, this bill was introduced in the House by the then Labour Minister Shri K.V. Raghunath Reddy. I was also present at that time in the House. After a period of 9 long years, this bill has now come from the cold storage. It shows how powerful the plantation lobby in the country is. even though after so much of time of this bill has now been brought, I support this bill in the name of a more comprehensive measure. I do not agree that this bill should be postponed or that it should be again referred to a joint committee. Some such proposal was there. I do not agree to that, though it is not adequate and some improvement from the point of view of workers is needed. I do not agree that we should postpone passing it. For example, it has been suggested that the acreage limit should be brought down to 5 hectares to cover more plantations in the south, especially in Kerala, Karnataka, and other southern states. Many plantations are not covered by this bill. I would request the minister to carefully examine this thing. In North India and some other places, tea plantation is on a large scale, but in the case of rubber, cardamom, and coffee, it is 5 hectares. This is on the high side. I request the Honorable Minister to reduce the acreage limit to 21/2 hectares for coffee and rubber and cardamom. Our friend was talking about socialism, socialistic society, democratic socialism, and so many other things. I earnestly request him to consider my suggestion, and that is whether the government is prepared to nationalize the tea industry. Sir, some 8 years ago in the Kerala Assembly, all the parties, including Congress Party, unanimously recommended to the central government for the takeover of the tea industry. In Kerala, tea plantation is owned by British monopolies. Even in the Assam Assembly, all the parties unanimously passed a resolution suggesting takeover of this industry. Are you prepared to take over this industry, especially this tea industry? I pose this question to the central government. Sir, this tea industry is owned by foreign monopolies and they are exploiting the workers. The situation in the tea industry is deteriorating. Are you prepared to nationalize it when you talk of socialism? Unless this is nationalized, you cannot meet the demands of the workers. Sir, how unfortunate for this country, predominantly agricultural, that the meaning of plantation in this bill has been stretched to include coconut gardens, apple, pineapple, cashew nut, and banana plantation farms. I am glad that wisdom has dawned on the government not to accept these recommendations of the committee. If I were an anarchist or a member who wished ill of this government, I would have pleaded with the government to stretch the meaning of plantations to cover all agricultural lands in the country and attract the provisions of this bill. Then we should have seen the beginning of convulsions and revolutions in this country, as the debt ridden farmers, being unable to fulfill the provisions of this bill, would have started filling up jails for violations of its provisions. Sir, I would take this opportunity to appeal to the Prime Minister to treat agriculture as an industry and treat agriculturists like the urban citizens and treat the farm holdings in the same way as they treat the factories and industries. The government should start finding out the invidious and discriminatory laws passed in the country since independence adversely affecting the farming community and review those laws if they want to ensure integrated development of the country. Mr. Vice Chairman, sir, you know, the undivided Congress, the Indian National Congress, fought for plantation labor and also for the rights and privileges of the peasantry. It was Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel and Mahatma Gandhi in the Chora Chori movement who brought the peasantry to the forefront to the leadership of the Indian National Congress. As successors of those great leaders in that organization, it is high time the Congress did their best for the plantation labor as well as the unorganized peasantry in that area. Even in Mexico, in Algeria, in Russia, or in Cuba, or in other countries, it was the labor, the plantation labor, who took the revolution to its final goal. Here in this country, we do not want to see another blood bath. We do not want to see that they take up arms against government or against employers. As people's representatives and as government of the people, we must do our best to solve their problems, whatever their grievances are, whatever their difficulties are, instead of allowing anybody to take advantage of their poverty and their difficulties. I know what goes on with plantation labor. I can give intense of instance of different plantations. I come from West Bengal where tea plantation is a very big factor, and I know how plantation labor are still being exploited. Housing facilities near the plantations is a must for them under the Act. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Sir, the resolution itself is very badly drafted, but it draws attention to one of the most pressing problems of this country. Full employment is an objective of every kind of economy in this world, whether capitalist, socialist, communist, or mixed economy. Therefore, it is also one of our objectives. But then we are not able to find out whether we are proceeding on the road of greater employment or greater unemployment. I am afraid that thinking on this matter is today so confused and contradictory that unless we can have a rational comprehension of the whole problem, we are not likely to make any headway. Therefore, I want to define how we should approach this problem. First of all, this is not a single problem but two different and distinct problems. We should not confuse total unemployment with partial employment or underemployment. These are two different things that have to be dealt with in entirely different fashions, but unfortunately, when we speak of 15 or 19 million unemployed, nobody knows how many of these are really totally unemployed and how many are suffering from seasonal or partial unemployment. Total unemployment is an urban phenomenon. It is only in cities and towns. You have people who have to work whatsoever. In the rural areas, it is always a case of partial unemployment or seasonal unemployment. Therefore, the first thing to be done in order to solve this is we must devise a machinery to ascertain how many are totally unemployed and how many are underemployed. So, I do suggest that every municipality in this country should maintain a register of the unemployed. Of course, we have now the labor exchanges. Unfortunately, they are not to be found everywhere, and all unemployed do not register themselves there. Therefore, I just suggested that in every municipality there should be an unemployment register, and propaganda should be done among the unemployed that they should first register themselves in the municipal register. Similarly, I would suggest that in every village panchayat there should be a register where people will register themselves for underemployment, because during the harvest season there is actual shortage of labor in the villages rather than the reverse. Therefore, there would have to be different kinds of registers to show in what seasons you want to give employment and to devise suitable employment. Then, secondly, we have to realize that so far as total unemployment is concerned, the only way is to develop industries and social services. The word employment is only used very loosely in the amber charkha. If a man gets 40 or 60 rupees, it is called employment. That will not do. We must define employment as giving him work which will give him living wages. Any work which does not give living wages should not be called employment. If we have to give living wages, the only way of doing it for the totally unemployed is to develop our industries and expand our social services. So far as social services are concerned, there is enormous scope for expansion. Why should you not in this country have one teacher for every 20 children? Why should we have one teacher for 40 children? Immediately, we can increase the strength of teachers by lakhs, but the real difficulty is we have to pay them, and therefore we are now caught in a dilemma. Without increase of wealth, we cannot increase the social services. Without increasing the social services, we cannot give sufficient and adequate employment for the totally unemployed in the towns. Therefore, the development of the industries is essential. Without the development of industries and social services, the problem of total unemployment, the planning commission, or anybody, of course, some kind of temporary employment can be devised by such ways as asking the men to go and dig the high level and make it low level and give them some temporary wages, but that will be only waste of scarce resources, and we shall not be solving the problem of unemployment. Therefore, a faster development of industry, and out of the surplus proceeds of the industry, a quicker development of the social service is the only possible solution for the total unemployment. For partial unemployment or underemployment in the villages, it has to be solved in a different way. Intensification of agriculture is bound to increase employment. For instance, wherever there is a single crop, if we can introduce double crop, the total amount of labor required will be doubled. Therefore, conversion of single croplands into double croplands and providing irrigation and other facilities for them is one of the certain methods of solving this underemployment. Again, many traditional services such as the annual repair of irrigation tanks, canals, etc. have lapsed. We must resume them. I am sure they will give at least an average of 20 underemployed workers in the villages, further lessening the employment problems in the country. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Mr. Vice Chairman Sir, at the outset, I must express my thanks to the honorable members on both sides of the House who have participated in the discussion on the 10th 5-year plan document. Honorable members will very kindly appreciate that within the short time at my disposal, it will not be possible for me to clarify all the points which they have raised during the course of the discussion. I am going to confine my remarks to certain important aspects of the discussion, though I have taken note of almost all the points which honorable members made during the course of the discussion. At the outset, I must also say that one of the honorable members was pleased to ask what is the purpose of having this kind of a discussion 1.5 years or almost 2 years after the plan has started? I do not know whether honorable members do recollect that my predecessor Mr. Tiwari had circulated a note to all the members of this house, particularly about the 10th plan framework, and he expected that the honorable members will be able to send their remarks to the minister and also to the planning commission so that before the draft document of the 10th plan is prepared and finalized, their views could be taken into account. How many members sent this kind of information is a matter which I will have to inquire into, but that exercise was gone into and now the plan was finalized in February 2001, and thereafter we have taken the earliest possible opportunity to see that the plan is discussed in both the houses. Sir, I am aware of the fact that the international situation and also the internal situation in which this 10th 5-year plan has been finalized. This will definitely have some kind of an impact on the plan document as it was prepared and how we will be succeeding in trying to avoid the adverse effects it might have on the achievement of the physical targets that we have set for ourselves at the end of the 10th 5-year plan. Sir, there are 3 points which were mentioned by all the honorable members. The first was that the plan was prepared with 1999-2000 as the base year, and thereafter there has been a price rise of a considerable order. Sir, the first thing which I would like to clarify is about the inflationary trend which has set in. One of the honorable members, Sri Shankar Ghosh, a very experienced member of this house who had also been in the planning commission and knows that intricacies of how the things are being worked out, has been pleased to state here that the rate of inflation is very high, and added to that the balance of payments position is going to be very bad compared with the percentage that we have worked out for the 10th plan as a whole. For imports, for the first year the import bill has risen very high. Then how is this assumption going to be correct? That is the point, and a very valid point which he raised during the course of the discussion. Sir, he also mentioned about the Honorable Finance Minister making his speech at Kanpur, where he seems to have made a reference that a little inflationary trend is a kind of a stimulant to the economy. Sir, the inflationary trends we cannot view in isolation. Honorable Sri Shankar Ghosh will definitely agree with us that there are two factors which will have to be taken into account. The first factor is the international situation which is now obtaining. Secondly, whether we like it or not, we have to import the oil products. If they are to be imported, can we take a serious view of the situation? That is a thing which I am sure most of the honorable members there will be able to appreciate. The second aspect is why is it that we have such a high import bill in 2000-2001 when the plan itself commenced, and when we are talking in terms of 9% immediately in the very first year it jumped. I am sure that most of the honorable members are aware of the fact that it is on account of the kind of legacy that this government got. I would not like to delete on this that issue, but the fact of the matter is that the agricultural production had gone down. Even in the industrial sector, there was a decline of 1.4%. The coal production had considerably gone down in terms of production, and the electricity generation was at the lowest. If we had to make a beginning, which in fact is within the control of the government of India, with these infrastructural facilities which will have to be provided both in the agricultural sector and the industrial sector, concerted efforts will have to be made. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Mr. Vice Chairman, the Minister of Railways has given us some impressive figures regarding route mileage, the number of passenger trains that run every day, the number of goods trains that run every day, the number of millions of passengers who travel by train. He has tried to compare them. In view of the vastness of the country, the large number of passenger trains being run, the large number of goods trains being run, and the big route mileage, he has tried to show that the number of accidents that have occurred is not quite alarming. I do not know what his idea was when he tried to compare the number of accidents against this background. Committees have been appointed when serious accidents took place to find out why such and such accident took place. The Shah Nawab Committee, which was appointed in 2006, gave a very voluminous report. Therein, they had stated that the causes of accident that occurred during the period before, and they had also suggested some preventive measures. The government have again appointed another committee headed by Dr. Kunjru. It is more than 8 months or so. I do not know why an interim report has not been submitted by this committee. It would have been better, at least for discussion on such an important subject like this, if that committee had submitted an interim report, we could have offered more constructive suggestions. Unfortunately, the committees that are appointed take their own time to submit their reports. Maybe the government is partly responsible for they may not be cooperating with the committee in giving all the material that is necessary for the committee to come to some sort of conclusions and give their findings on such an important question. Time and again, we have discussed this question of accidents, and I was really pained to see how the minister tried to minimize the seriousness of the railway accidents. He also quoted in the other house the figures, the number of accidents that are taking place in other countries, particularly America and England. The conditions that are obtaining in these countries and that are obtaining in India are totally different. There, many of the accidents take place not because of follies, not because of the limitations under which those railways works, but mostly because of the environment that there has been in those countries. So he did not mention the figures here but took refuge under the guise that our railways work much better than the railways work in other countries and the that the rate of accident in India is much lower than the rate of accidents in America or England. Sir, by having this discussion, the railway board and the railway ministry should be able to learn some lessons, and if they are prepared to implement the salient suggestions that will be made by the members, then many of these discussions will not take place, and many of the accidents that take place these days will not occur. It has now become almost an everyday affair. After the statement was made by the Honorable Minister in this House and the other House, another accident has occurred to a deluxe train. It is therefore incumbent and imperative on the part of the Railway Ministry to see whether they could avoid these accidents. Many of the accidents that have occurred not because they are accidents but because of the wrong things done by the Railway Ministry. When a train leaves the station, care is not taken to see whether it has defective engine, defective locomotive, whether proper check was made of it, whether the bogies that are attached to the train are properly checked up, whether the screws and bolts that are there are properly placed in their proper place, and so on. These are all things which, if properly inspected, will show whether the train is fit for travelers or not. And if these things are properly adhered to, many of the accidents will not occur. A member in the other house has reported a statement from the statesman of Kolkata that the loco-shed people asked the driver of a particular train to somehow manage, even though he complained that he could not take the train. He tried to manage. When the train arrived very late, he was said to have been manhandled by the crowd for the late arrival of the train, and he is reported to have stated to the correspondent that in spite of the protest that he made, he was asked to take that locomotive which was very defective. Last year, similar accident occurred, for instance, the Ranchi accident. It is also reported that the engine driver protested when he was asked to take the train because the engine was defective. But in spite of his protests, he was forced to take that engine and an accident occurred. I am glad that an inquiry commission has been appointed to go into the cause of the accident. Stop.